my last video went over application services, and in this one we're going to talk about monitoring and security. And when you're looking into monitoring and security, there's a certain model that you should follow. It is called Raci, and this stands for responsibility, accountability, consulting, and informed. So responsibility, who is responsible, accountability, who's going to be held accountable, consulting, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. And when you're going through this, not only can you do this in your organization, but you should also do this in terms of Azure or any other cloud's scenario. So you have to understand what what in this specific instance, what Azure takes care of. But this could be switched out for anything else that you would need it to be. And what do you take care of? Because you might not be responsible for it, but you might want to be informed. You might not have to physically be maintaining the hardware, but you might want to know if there's going to be downtime. And there's a bunch of different layers that are pretty important to understand to grasp the concept of this monitoring and security. So you have a data layer where all your data is, and then your applications, your middleware, your runtime, your OS, and then there's things that Azure's responsible, those things you were responsible for, and moving on, things like hypervisor, compute, network, storage. And these aren't things that you physically have to keep up to date in things. These are things that you specify to Azure that you would like, and then they provision those for you. And kind of above all of this, you have it's like when you're actually setting all this up, you have your different layers, and you have your Azure AD. And this is kind of where all your monitoring starts. So, sprouting off your AAD, this will monitor any kind of attacks. And then underneath your Azure AD, you'll go into your subscription level, and this will have things such as activity logs and service health. And even under that, you're going to have your ARM resources. So you might have your ARM, and then ARM sends out, they're sending out two main things. There's metrics and then there's logs. So your metrics are going to be your fast and numerical data, and it's very fast, and you keep these for up to 90 days, and they're numeric. In logs, there's a bit more latency to it, and you have to physically configure these. you say what you want and where you want them to go. These can be numeric or text, and logs won't exist until you configure them. So your metrics will always run, and then your logs you have to physically set up. Then within your ARM, you might have an OS with its own metrics and logs. And there's not just one log or one metric. There's, as you can see, at various different levels, they exist. And you won't have your logs until you set them up. Now, all of these are kind of like diagnostics, grouping them all into one large group. And this is kind of a large amount of, this is just for one, this is just one Azure Active Directory that splits into one subscription, one ARM, and then goes into an OS. So you're going to have a lot of these, so coming up is what you're going to want to know on how to kind of manage all of that, and what you actually need them for. So you're going to have a bunch of different logs, a bunch of different metrics. You're going to have all your different diagnostics, and they have to go somewhere. And you're kind of going to get a couple of options. You can create a storage blob, which is nice and cheap. Typically the preferred one for any sort of long-term storage, event hub, that integrates third-party, and log analytics. And this log analytics has a maximum of a 2-year retention. And not only does log analytics only have that, there's a cost with your incoming data, as well as your storage. So a storage blob you might only have to pay for just the storage, but log analytics you have to pay for your data and your storage. With this you can set capacity controls to help lower cost. You can export tables from log analytics or event hub or storage. You can set up a logic. All that will filter and do things. You can set up a logic app, and all that will do things at a specific time. One thing to keep in mind though is log analytics can be expensive. Make sure you have a plan, and you don't need all of the data. You don't need to take all of the metrics and all of the logs, so only set up what you need to minimize your costs. And with all this data, kind of the main thing is that this is data that you're going to want to use. So going back briefly to making sure it's only what you need, make sure you have what you need. So this really kind of streamlines the whole process, and there's something at the end that kind of takes all this data and will kind of put it all together, and like your log analytics, it'll take it, put it all together, and then insights, that's what it was called. Insights puts this all together into a nice format for you to use. you could guess on what matters the most, or you could use insights that'll take those analytics and really overall help increase productivity, removing the time that it would take to manually figure everything out. And it splits everything out in a very nice way. And with insights, you can use a workbook or custom. Workbook you can edit, and customs you cannot. There's also a dashboard. That's kind of like, it's a lot more visual for you. It's really set up to work with the portal quite in sync. And if you have, and using the dashboard, you can take any of these insights and you can set up alerts or commands to execute off your data. So if you're attacked, it can do something for you. And you should use basic cybersecurity principles when setting all this up just to begin with. So you want to have just enough access. Just enough to do what they need to do, and because not everyone needs admin permissions. And then just permissions in general. Make sure that you're patching everything. Make sure you have anti-malware and that's all up to date. Firewalls. NSGs. And then overall, just try and minimize your responsibility by using more PaaS solutions instead of your infrastructure solutions. And there's also something called Azure Security Center that helps you with this monitoring. And it works well with Azure Policy. Azure Sentinel takes the alerts from Azure Security Center, and Sentinel can hunt, alert, take action, log incidents, there's a broad amount of things that you can use it for, but those are the main ones. And this uses kind of like machine learning to make sure that everything works. And it's doing what you want, and just machine learning can be a little complicated, so I won't really go into that right now. And Sentinel isn't just for that though, like it can do a lot more with connectors that connect to your OS, your device, your network, your firewall services, events, etc. And you can use third-party links that will kind of use anything that you have, if you have any incoming data, any incoming metrics, I should say, or it can combine that into Azure Security Sentinels kind of thinking and everything, tying back into the machine learning. It doesn't only just do what it was built to do, but it also tries to create upon itself. And overall, you also want to minimize credentials. You should typically have these tied to a managed identity. And I already made a video on this, so go watch that to understand how to tie credentials to Azure AD and managed identity and all that kind of stuff. You need keys. If you need keys and secrets, because that will happen, and they don't support RBAC, you can use Azure Key Vault and implement RBAC into the Key Vault itself. Alright, so that's kind of the majority of monitoring and security. This isn't a huge thing. Overall, it's a pretty small topic, to be honest, because a lot of the other stuff has already gone into security and that kind of stuff, in its own separate videos, because security and monitoring is such a huge thing anymore. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one, and in the next one we'll be covering databases, and we're actually getting towards the end of the main curriculum videos. We'll have the upcoming database video, an infrastructure as a code, Git, and DevOps video, and then the final overview video. So we're coming down to like the final 3 videos in this series. I will also have one with my day of preparations, the day after the test, and a wrap up and what's next for me. So like what's the next curriculum that I'm going to be looking at. But that's pretty much it for this one. Thank you. See you soon.